Isaac Newton, English mathematician, December 25th, 1642 to March 20th, 1727.
We build too many walls, and not enough bridges. If I have seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants. Genius is patience. To every action, there is always opposed and equal reaction. Truth is ever to be found in simplicity, and not in the multiplicity and confusion of things. I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people. My powers are ordinary. Only my application brings me success. I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself, I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore and diverting myself now and then in finding a smoother pebble or prettier shell than ordinary, while the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me. What goes up must come down. Tact is the art of making a point without making an enemy. Atheism is so senseless. When I look at the solar system, I see the Earth at the right distance from the Sun to receive the proper amounts of heat and light. This did not happen by chance. The description of right lines and circles, upon which geometry is founded, belongs to mechanics. Geometry does not teach us to draw these lines, but requires them to be drawn. Errors are not in the art, but in the artificers. It is the weight, not numbers of experiments, that is to be regarded. The moon gravitates towards the earth, and by the force of gravity, it is continually drawn off from a rectilinear motion and retained in its orbit. Plato is my friend. Aristotle is my friend, but my greatest friend is truth. Are not rays of light very small bodies emitted from shining substances? The smaller the planets are, they are, other things being equal, of so much the greater density, for so the powers of gravity on their several surfaces come nearer to equality. They are likewise, other things being equal, of the greater density, as they are nearer to the sun. An object in motion tends to remain in motion, along a straight line, unless acted upon by an outside force. This most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. A man may imagine things that are false, but he can only understand things that are true, for if the things be false, the apprehension of them is not understanding. The best and safest method of philosophizing seems to be the first to inquire diligently into the properties of things, and establishing those properties by experiments, and then to proceed more slowly to hypothesis for the explanation of them. If the experiments which I urge to be defective, it cannot be difficult to show the defects, but if valid, then by proving the theory, they must render all objections invalid. It is reasonable that forces directed towards bodies depend on the nature and the quantity of matter of such bodies, as happens in the case of magnetic bodies. Absolute space, in its own nature, without regard to anything external, remains always similar and immovable. Relative space is some movable dimension or measure of the absolute spaces, which our senses determine by its position to bodies, and which is vulgarly taken for a movable space. Gravity may put the planets into motion, but without the divine power, it could never put them into such a circulating motion as they have about the sun, and therefore, for this as well as other reasons, I am compelled to ascribe the frame of this system to an intelligent agent. To explain all nature is too difficult a task for any one man, or even for any one age. 'Tis much better to do a little with certainty, and leave the rest for others that come after you. The proper method for inquiring after the properties of things is to deduce them from experiments. Fidelity and allegiance sworn to the king is only such a fidelity and obedience as is due to him by the law of the land. For were that faith and allegiance more than what the law requires, we would swear ourselves slaves, and the king absolute. Whereas by the law, we are free men, notwithstanding those oaths. If I have done the public any service, it is due to my patient thought. I have explained the phenomena of the heavens and of our sea by the force of gravity, but I have not yet assigned a cause to gravity. The center of the system of the world is immovable. It may be that there is no such thing as an equable motion, whereby time may be accurately measured. All motions may be accelerated or retarded, but the true or equable progress of absolute time is liable to no change. If a projectile were deprived of the force of gravity, it would not be deflected towards the earth, but would go off in a straight line into the heavens and do so with uniform motion, provided that the resistance of the air were removed. Gravity must be caused by an agent acting constantly according to certain laws, but whether this agent be material or immaterial, I have left to the consideration of my readers. Resistance is usually ascribed to bodies at rest, and impulse to those in motion. But motion and rest, as commonly conceived, are only relatively distinguished, nor are those bodies always truly at rest, which commonly are taken to be so. Infinites, when considered absolutely without any restriction or limitation, are neither equal nor unequal, nor have any certain proportion one to another, and therefore the principle that all infinites are equal is a precarious one. Nothing can be divided into more parts than it can possibly be constituted of, but matter, i.e., finite, cannot be constituted of infinite parts. To me, there has never been a higher source of earthly honor or distinction than that connected with advances in science. The motions which the planets now have could not spring from any natural cause alone, but were impressed by an intelligent agent. Hypotheses should be subservient only in explaining the property of things, but not assumed in determining them, unless so far as they may furnish experiments. In experimental philosophy, we are to look upon propositions inferred by general induction from phenomena as accurately or very nearly true, notwithstanding any contrary hypotheses that may be imagined, till such time as other phenomena occur by which they may either be made more accurate or liable to exceptions. We are certainly not to relinquish the evidence of experiments for the sake of dreams and vain fictions of our own devising, nor are we to recede from the analogy of nature, which is wont to be simple and always consonant to itself. That the divided but contiguous particles of bodies may be separated from one another is a matter of observation, and in the particles that remain undivided, our minds are able to distinguish yet lesser parts, as is mathematically demonstrated. The same thing is to be understood of all bodies revolved in any orbits. They all endeavor to recede from the centers of their orbits, and were it not for the opposition of a contrary force, which restrains them to and detains them in their orbits, which I therefore call centripetal, would fly off in right lines with a uniform motion. If anyone offers conjectures about the truth of things from the mere possibility of hypotheses, I do not see by what stipulation anything certain can be determined in any science, since one or another set of hypotheses may always be devised which will appear to supply new difficulties. I do not love to be printed on every occasion, much less to be dunned and teased by foreigners about mathematical things, or to be thought by our own people to be trifling away my time about them, when I should be about the king's business. I there represent that I sent notice of my method to Mr. Leibniz before he sent notice of his method to me, and left him to make it appear that he had found his method before the date of my letter. It is indeed a matter of great difficulty to discover and effectually to distinguish the true motions of particular bodies from the apparent, because the parts of that immovable space in which those motions are performed do by no means come under the observation of our senses. The ignis fatuus is a vapor shining without heat. Why there is one body in our system qualified to give light and heat to all the rest, I know no reason but because the author of the system thought it convenient. And why there is but one body of this kind, I know no reason but because one was sufficient to warm and enlighten all the rest. We are to admit no more causes of natural things than such as are both true and sufficient to explain their appearances. Just as the system of the sun, planets, and comets is put in motion by the forces of gravity, and its parts persist in their motions, so the smaller systems of bodies also seem to be set in motion by other forces, and their particles to be variously moved in relation to each other, and especially by the electric force. The same law takes place in a system consisting of many bodies, as in one single body, with regard to their preserving in their state of motion or of rest. For the progressive motion, whether of one single body or of a whole system of bodies, is always to be estimated from the motion of the center of gravity. The ancients considered mechanics in a twofold respect, as rational, which proceeds accurately by demonstration, and practical. To practical mechanics, all the manual arts belong, from which mechanics took its name. There are more sure marks of authenticity in the Bible than in any profane history. The hypothesis of matters being at first evenly spread through the heavens is, in my opinion, inconsistent with the hypothesis of innate gravity without a supernatural power to reconcile them, and therefore it infers a deity. Religion and philosophy are to be preserved distinct. We are not to introduce divine revelations into philosophy, nor philosophical opinions into religion. In the beginning of the year 1665, I found the method of approximating series and the rule for reducing any dignity of any binomial into such a series.